Meeting room.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Pat from the Dallas Public Library. Just some heads up before we start the program. We will be recording this program, so if you prefer not to be recorded, we just ask that you disable your camera, and we'll be keeping you on mute throughout the program as well. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and either Helen or I will be reading them to our presenter today. Thanks again for joining us. We'll be starting here shortly.
All right, we're right at 12 o'clock. And so we're going to get started. My name is Helen Dulac. I work for the City of Dallas in the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability. And I'm going to do a brief presentation, and then I'm going to introduce our speaker. So how's that looking? Is the presentation showing?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, great. All right, so I am super excited to be working with my pals at the Dallas Public Library Seed Library on this series called Grow With Us. It's every Monday at noon, and we do different types of gardening, urban agriculture, presentations to help you and the city be more sustainable. Just a note, we will not have a program the Monday after Thanksgiving. We will have a program the Monday before Thanksgiving. So just to give you a brief summary about my department, because you maybe have never heard of it, we were formed in 2004, but back then we were called the Office of Environmental Quality. We worked really hard for 4 years to help Dallas become the first city in the United States to achieve ISO 14001 standard. And what does that mean? Well, what we did is we looked at our operations across 14 different departments in the city to see how we could still provide service with less of an environmental impact. So we looked at the vehicles we use, the equipment, all the way to the paper we put in the copy machine. And this is a national, it's actually a worldwide certification, and we get audited every year to keep it. And what's special about this is that this was Dallas, Texas that achieved this first. It wasn't a city in California. It wasn't a city in Colorado. It wasn't Austin. It was Dallas. So Dallas actually has a history of being green and continues to be so. So let's fast forward 10 years, and a lot of changes happened in my department. There was a restructuring in the city, and we actually absorbed some other environmental operations and doubled in size. And to reflect that change, we changed our name. That's when we became Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability. Also that year, we had a new outreach and engagement team that formed that I am a proud member of. And in the very next year, in 2019, Mayor Johnson formed a council committee on the environment and sustainability. They meet Monday mornings, and those meetings are open to the public. And if you want to keep up with what Dallas is doing environmentally, that is a great place to start. If you have heard of my department, it's because on May 27th of this year, the City Council passed Dallas's first Comprehensive Environmental and Climate Action Plan, known as CCAP. This is our roadmap for the next 30 years on how we can help mitigate climate change and improve the quality of life for everybody in Dallas. And what's neat about this is Dallas is one of the few cities in Texas and one of the few cities not along the coast that has a climate plan. And you can read about it at dallasclimateaction.com. And even today's presentation goes to one of the goals of the CCAP, which is all Dallas residents have access to healthy food. I mentioned that my department actually doubled in size, and you can see those groups in green are the ones that joined us. I'm going to talk about one of those just briefly, and that is stormwater. So stormwater is anytime rain or water leaves your property. So it could be from your lawn sprinkler systems or from a running hose, and that water travels down your yard, into the street, down those gutters, all the way to that big drain at the end of the street. Well, that big drain is called a storm drain inlet, and it's there for one reason, and it's to remove the water so the streets don't flood. They do a great job. They remove that water very, very quickly, but that water is not cleaned and it is not treated before it goes into a creek, which eventually connects to one of our lakes or the Trinity River. So if that water picks up any pollution along the way, that's how that pollution can get into our surface waters. So for example, litter, any sort of extra chemicals that you might have left. And Dr. Joe's going to talk a lot about that today, about using the proper amount of fertilizers so that you don't have waste or runoff. and also bacteria that's in pet waste. So if you're walking your dogs or you have dogs, make sure you pick up after them on walks and also from your yard at least once a week. And so I mentioned that I'm part of the outreach and engagement team, and we want to empower Dallas to save the earth. Well, that's a pretty big job there, right? So how do we do it? We do it by having virtual presentations like this and in person when we're allowed. You can invite us to speak to HOA meetings, different clubs and organizations. We also have information for kids all the way from K to college, and we can do different kinds of seminars and events. This is a free service for groups and people located in the city of Dallas. Now, we also host some of our own events, and the biggest one we have coming up is actually on November 7th, and it is the WaterWise Landscape Tour. And so there's two parts to this. You can actually enter your WaterWise landscape in, and you can actually win a recognition or an award for your landscape. Plus, it becomes an inspiration for all the people who tune in on November 7th. So on November 7th, we're going to highlight the winning landscapes and some of the other outstanding landscapes that we get, along with having some special speakers and a really nice seminar on November 7th. So enter your landscape by October 31st, and also save the date for the seminar on November 7th. And all that information can be found at savedallaswater.com. Now, if you want to invite us to speak to your group or your organization, we can talk about environmental topics from A to Z, all the way from air quality to zero waste. So visit our website, greendallas.net, for more information. Also fill out an event request form if you'd like for us to speak. And if you ever have any questions for me or anybody on my team, please send an email to greendallas@dallascityhall.com. And please follow us on social media. We are Green Dallas TX on Facebook, and we are at Green Dallas on Twitter and Instagram. And you'll find out about programs like this and lots of other programs we have, because we actually have a series of 3 programs with the Dallas Public Library. So with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Dr. Joe. He is back again to talk to us about garden fertilization, particularly with vegetable gardening, the right way, the wrong way, and some of his personal experiences. And I think he's even going to do a little bit about composting, which is a super popular topic also. So Dr. Joe, please take it away.
Good morning or good afternoon, everybody. And let me see. You can see my screen?
Not quite yet.
Oh, sorry. I have to press share.
You're keeping all the good information to yourself, aren't you?
That's right. Okay. How
now
about
it looks
now?
great.
You see that?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, it's on this screen, so I may be looking at the wrong place. All right. Welcome, everybody. Like Helen said, I will be sharing with you my opinion, my thoughts, my experience on fertilization. There is a lot of math in this, but I'm not going to go in them. You should get a copy of the PDF copy if you like, and you can study it at your leisure, follow the math, follow the logic. And please, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me. Fertilization is as important as watering, as important as starting with a good soil. Starting with a good soil, good raised bed. Soil is the foundation, followed by water and fertilization. And if you do those right, that's half the battle. The rest is being there all the time, checking for insects and diseases. And if you do all this, you should never fail. So let's focus a little bit about fertilization. And with that, a little bit about what do we mean by the fertilizer when you look at a bag and what's those numbers mean, and in general, what the plants need. The plants need what you see here. Some of them, the plant needs in a large amount, like NPK, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. It needs a large amount of them. That's why they're called primary nutrients. It needs less. So like these will need in a percent, and these will need in the 1 parts per million, 1.5 parts per million. So that's why they're called secondary nutrients. And remember, 1% is 10,000 parts per million. So you can see how much more the plants need. So if it needs 1% N, that's 10,000 times more than calcium at 1 part per million. So that's the difference. And it needs these micronutrients in the 0.1, 0.2 parts per million, that kind of level. Minuscule amount, but without them, you will see symptoms, deficiency symptoms, the plant's not growing well. Iron, for example, is like a drop in a swimming pool amount. You don't think it matters, but it does matter and it's necessary. So they're all necessary, just the name is different because of the amount that the plant needs. Nitrogen is the major concern. Basically, everything you read about fertilization follows nitrogen. Based on nitrogen, everything else follows with it. Nitrogen is very water soluble. So don't be surprised, for example, in a situation where you fertilized and then 2 days later you send a soil sample and it tells you nitrogen is not there, you need nitrogen. And you say, I fertilized 2 days ago. Well, you either watered or it rained an inch and that nitrogen was moved with the water below the level where you sampled from and it shows you need nitrogen. That's why it's very water soluble and you have to always watch how you add it, and we'll talk about that. Phosphorus is the other extreme end in terms of solubility. It does not move with the water at all. Where you put it, it stays there in that spot. It needs root activity or microorganisms activity for it to be dissolved and made available for the roots. And I call it most abused element in the sense that we have it, our soils are rich in phosphorus, and yet we keep adding fertilizer. And that can cause trouble. If you reach excess levels, you can have iron and zinc deficiency. Potassium is in mid-range between nitrogen and phosphorus in terms of water solubility. But again, it's not an issue. You should not have to worry about having it in your soils. Get a soil test to confirm that. It's only in East Texas where you have sandy soil and lots of rain that you can have situation where it washed down and washed away and you may need to add some. Why nitrogen is important? Well, it's when you see here, it's at the center of the chlorophyll molecule. It's important for growth. It's important for cell walls. So think of leaves. Nitrogen is for the green tissue, for the green photosynthesis. So when you think leaves, think nitrogen. If you're growing something that's a leafy, not roots, not fruits, let's say lettuce, your concern should be if it doesn't have enough nitrogen. So if you don't have enough, your leaves are pale, small, the plant are stunted, all related to leaf symptoms where you see the damage, the deficiency symptoms is in the leaves. Phosphorus is for roots. Deficiency affects root growth and development, affects cell division, affects a little bit of fruits, but the majority of the work is phosphorus. So when I said for nitrogen, think leaves. When you think of phosphorus, think roots. And finally, the symptoms of phosphorus deficiency, you have purple coloration, the plants are stunted, delayed maturity. Also, you picture what I mean by that probably better than reading all this. Of course, there's tons of pictures online and for different plants showing different symptomology. So don't hesitate to look search online for symptoms for your crop. And here's that picture. These I got for free actually. They donated them at the nursery because they're not diseased. They're just hungry. You see the pale color all over, especially the lower leaves are most affected because the plant steals the nitrogen from the lower leaf and moves it to the youngest leaves. So typical nitrogen deficiency symptom. The youngest leaves are still greener. The oldest leaves are very pale yellow. So that's nitrogen deficiency. Look at the purple coloration everywhere, especially the veins, especially on the underside where you can clearly see the veins. That purple coloration is phosphorus deficiency. I got these plants for free because they're just hungry. They're not sick, and I grew them and they did wonderful. Just feed them and they'll perk up, and they came back to life. So N for roots, N for leaves, phosphorus or P is for roots, and potassium is for fruits. So if you're growing anything that has fruit in it, your potassium has to be a little extra than if you were growing a potato, or if you're growing something like a lettuce or spinach leaf, for example. And that's why this is this list here. I'm not going to read it. It'll tell you why potassium is important. So I always used to say NPK means leaves, roots, fruits. And one master gardener told me one time, and I thought it was very smart. They told me NPK for them means top, down, and all around. Top meaning the leaves, down meaning the roots, and all around meaning everything. Because potassium is needed everywhere in the plant, but especially when you have roots, when you have fruits. Okay, so deficiency symptoms, lots of discoloration on the leaves that can burning on the edges, etc. But you can easily know is that the fruits will abort or not develop well. Okay. What is the best way to correct nutrient deficiencies? Most people think that I'm foliar feeding. And one time a gardener argued with me, oh, I always foliar feed. If I see nitrogen deficiency, foliar feed, like spray the leaf with fertilizer solution. Well, I know that leaves absorb only 5 to 10% of what the roots can absorb. So if the plant needs a lot of nitrogen and whatever you're feeding it, it's only absorbing 5%, that's not enough. That is not enough. That's like someone starving and you tell them, I'll give you a teaspoon every hour and you'll recuperate. Well, they're not going to recuperate with a teaspoon every hour. They're starving. They haven't eaten in 10 days. So we argued back and forth until later I realized, where is 90, like a bulb lit above my head, where is 90% of that fertilizer solution going that, he's spraying on the plants? It's going on the soil, and then the root is absorbing that. So I told him, you know what, you're right, I'm wrong. God bless, keep doing what you're doing. It works. So fixing nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium deficiency by foliar feeding does not work if you missed the plants. But if you have micronutrient deficiency, like iron, you can spray iron once, iron chelate, and the plants will perk up in a couple of days. That works because even if it absorbs, the leaves absorb 5% of what you sprayed, that is more than enough because the plant needs very small amounts of that. Okay. What is our biggest problem with fertilization by especially homeowners, commercial growers? I'll show you why, because it's expensive and they're out to make money. They want to save, so they do the math to the penny. Homeowners are usually generous. If the bag tells them put a teaspoon per gallon, they put 1.5 or 2. So our biggest problem with fertilization is overuse, which causes runoff and leaching, which you're wasting your money, you're hurting the soil, you're hurting the rivers, the creeks, all that, with the potential contamination of groundwater and streams. And the sad news is this bag of triple 13 is cheaper than if you buy the individual elements, NPK, and make a 13% solution of that. So it's cheaper, it's handy, it works. We end up using it. By the way, for those of you who know absolutely nothing about fertilizer, these 3 numbers is the percent of N and P and K in the bag. So you have 40-pound bag, 13% of that is N, 13% of that is P2O5, phosphorus, and 13% is K2O or potassium. Okay, and then the rest is a filler. So you have 49% and 51% is not fertilizer. Okay, so if 13, 13, 13, or triple 13, and you see some triple 10 or triple 20, Those are, I told you, is a little bit over abuse of the phosphorus, and here's why. If you analyze all of the plant species, from the smallest algae to the biggest oak tree, and the ornamentals and the vegetable, the leaf content, you find that they're all about the same percent of NPK in their tissue. 2.5 to 5, 2 to 7 for fruits, 2 to 6 for ornamentals. So the fertilizer ratio needed to meet that amount that's in the tissue is 15, 3.5, 10. We apply 13, 13, 13. So nitrogen is little less, but and phosphorus is little less. Sorry, nitrogen. So those are close to 13 when you apply triple 13. But if you need 3.5 and you're applying triple 13, you need 3.5%, you're applying 13%. That's a big difference. That's why, and I told you our soils have phosphorus, so don't add too much. If you want to use granular fertilizer, the better option would be 15, 5, 10, which is sold for the turf fertilizer. Just make sure you don't get the one that has herbicide in it, like it may say on it, weed and feed. You don't want the herbicide, you just want the 15, 5, 10, because 15, 5, 10 is very close to 15, 3.5, 10. You're not over abusing the phosphorus, you're not adding more, because excessive phosphorus, like I said, will cause iron and zinc deficiency because it binds to them and makes them not available to the plant. So the key to a successful nutrient management, if you're a commercial grower, you have to get a soil test regularly. If you're a beginning gardener, get it 2 or 3 times at the beginning just to see where you are and what you're doing, what you're adding and what you're removing and what's left, how is the soil responding to that. But with those numbers, that's the best way you can really make a smart decision on how much you need to add. Of course, the results are site-specific. You get a soil test from the front yard, and you cannot say it will, the soil in the backyard will behave the same way, unless you sample from all the location, front yard, backyard, mix them all together and send them as one sample, and then you'll say, okay, that's the average of the whole location. Okay. Let's see. So for Texas A&M, our soil analysis, and I'll show you some examples, but the results are rated as very high, high, medium, low, and very low. If you choose not to add anything and your soil tests tell you you are high or very high in content of that mineral, then if you don't add anything else, you don't have to. Because if your soil test comes back high or very high, there's no benefit to adding more. If your soil test comes back and tells you you have medium, like the rating is medium content for that mineral or for all of them, then if you don't add anything, then you can reach at least 75% of the maximum potential yield if you add nothing. You're happy with 75% of potential yield with adding nothing, then do nothing. Low, your projected yield benefit is 50 to 75, and very low, it's about 25 to 50%. So you need to add. If you choose not to add, these are what your expected yields will be if you add nothing, and you get this rating on your soil test result. And this is how the Texas A&M soil test result comes back. And these are the numbers I just described: very high, high, moderate, low, very low. That's where they are. When you get a soil test, it'll give you your results in a bar graph that you see here, or in a number compared to the critical level that you need. So for example, and also in the bar graph, you see the CL, that is the line that you want to reach, and this is where you're at. So the nitrate, your result was 40. You need a little bit more than that. But I guess 40 is fine. Phosphorus, you need 50. Your salt test is 265. So you don't need nothing for phosphorus. And same thing. So here is what they measured for your soil. And here's the critical level minimum needed. Based on these two numbers right here, they tell you if you need to add anything. So this soil test from a raised bed I had in College Station years back, adding compost regularly, fertilizing regularly, you see that I have nothing to add. No lime, pH is 7.2, 6.5 is more ideal, but 7.2 is fine. I'll talk more about that later. Sodium, it's still low, between low and moderate. College Station water is a little bit salty, but with all the rain we get in the fall and winter, that never becomes an issue. So that's what you'd like to see. You'd like to see these bars reaching the critical level and nothing you have to recommend. Make sure you tell them this is a vegetable garden. So they give you the recommendation per 1,000 square feet. If you don't, they think you're a commercial grower and they send you the number per acre. And of course, a typical raised bed is 80 square feet. So you have to do some math to adjust from 1,000 to 80 square feet. And here I told you there's some math. Study it on your own in case you want to know what does that 40 parts per million mean in pounds of N per acre or per 1,000 square feet. Well, here's the formula. Parts per million times 2 is relative amount of nutrient in the top 6 inches of soil. So 40 times 2 is 80 pounds of N per acre. Well, acre is 43,560 square feet. So 80 pounds in that, how much in 1,000 square feet you have? If you have 1,000 square feet and you sample the top 6 inches, that in that volume of soil, you have 1.8 pound of N in that area. And of course, you may find that you definitely need to add more. But anyway, this is the math. Study it. You may never use it. If you do, that's how to do it. Now, one important point you have to learn to do, and even if you want to be organic and use organic fertilizers, you need a starter fertilizer, which is high in phosphorus immediately after transplanting. Even if the rest of the season you want to deal with organic fertilizer, unless you're a commercial grower and you're certified and you absolutely cannot use any chemical fertilizer, even if, if you are hardcore organic and absolutely no chemical, please use a starter fertilizer, which is high in phosphorus. I'll give you an alternative, but this is very easy. Starter fertilizer, if it doesn't say on it what's a starter fertilizer mean, look at these numbers here, these 3 examples. Remember NPK, N is low, not very high, but look at the amount of phosphorus, very high, 34, 24, 31. And K is very low or nothing because roots don't need that much of potassium. So it's like a shot in the arm of a lot of phosphorus at transplanting time, because remember, phosphorus is for roots, to encourage a lot of root development. Okay, and here's the recipe. All right, so what I usually tell gardeners of success is this. The last thing before planting is add compost, and the first thing after transplanting is add starter fertilizer. If you do these two, add compost, add organic matter before planting, and then add starter fertilizer after planting, your plants will love you for it, and there's no way they can fail or not grow very well. Okay, so the optimum way to apply nitrogen, remember nitrogen is very water soluble, so the optimum way to apply nitrogen is apply 50% of it as a pre-plant, incorporate it, spread it. Let's say you're using granular, spread it, mix it in the soil, but 50% of the recommendation. And then the other 50% spread out over 2 or 3 times over the season. Because if you put it all at once, remember it will move and you water or it rains and you wash it down and you lose it. That's why spread it over 3 or 4 applications is best. Phosphorus, because it does not move at all, you can put all the phosphorus that we recommend, or the soil test recommends, or the label recommends, let's say seeding instructions recommend, or you can put it all as a band, and that will the plants will be fine for the whole season. But the banding, there's a nice formula you have to follow. It's called 2 by 2. So 2 to the side and 2 inches deeper. And if you do that, you can if you band, you can apply less than what the soil recommend and still get the total benefit instead of spread. Let's say I tell you add a pound, broadcast it in the garden and mix it on your raised bed and mix it. That's a pound. You can put 3/4 of a pound as a band next to your row of tomatoes, and you will still get the same benefit as if you you spread that whole pound over the whole raised bed. Okay, and this picture shows you 2 by 2 rules, 2 inches out, 2 inches below. So you see this white band? This is the band of phosphorus. It's white color. That's still there. See, at harvest, 90 days or 70 days after the carrot was seeded, you can still see it. And that's proof it does not move. But where was that band made? 2 inches to the side and 2 inches deep from here where the seed was. Because the roots will go down and out and it will pass through that band and they will take all the roots, all the phosphorus they want season long. So 2 out, so find the line where you're planting your seeds or your transplants, 2 inches to the side and 2 inches deep. And also only on one side, not on both sides. Okay, that's the best way to band your phosphorus. The potassium, because it does not move too much, you can put all the potassium recommendation I tell you or anybody tells you, broadcast, mix it in before planting, and then you're done. So if you band your phosphorus, if you broadcast your potassium before planting, then during the season, all you have to worry about is nitrogen, whether it's from blood meal, organic, or from urea, or ammonium nitrate, or calcium nitrate, if you like to use chemical fertilizers. And that combination is the best. How much to apply? Let's think about that. If you do not get a soil test, how much do you apply? Well, my recommendation, apply small amounts of fertilizer several times during the growing season and see how much yield you got, ask around, and then see if you can do better. So let's say you want to add 1/2 pound of N per 1,000 square feet. And here's the formula, how to do the math. 1,000, and you want to use 13. Remember, that's 13%. 1/2 pound of N divided by 13% divided by 1,000 square feet times 80 square feet, because your raised bed is 4 by 20. Then for that one raised bed that you are using 13, you need 1/3 of a pound of the 13 spread evenly over the whole raised bed to get that 1/2 pound of N. So you can do that every 3 weeks, every month, and see how that results. I think it's a little low, but lots of people, a lot of gardeners, I call it shoot from the hip. They don't like to plan. They don't like to do real numbers. They like to try and enjoy and as a hobby. Okay, start with that. You will definitely get yields. Maximum yield, probably not. Okay. A great gardener told me this one time, that this is his tomato fertilizer, 2 tablespoons of Epsom salt, which we know is magnesium sulfate. So it provides magnesium and provides sulfur, 2 elements that the plant needs. 2 tablespoons of gypsum, which is like lime and balances the pH of what you have here and here. and provides calcium and provides phosphorus. And quarter to half teaspoon of balanced fertilizer and apply monthly for tomato plants, for each tomato plant. You cannot go wrong with this recipe. It's a lot of, so you can pre-mix it that, you can mix a large volume of that in advance. Okay? With a soil test. So without a soil test, I gave you two ideas. One idea here and one idea here. But I suggest you get a soil test until you learn what you're doing and how's that affecting your yields and your soil health. With a soil test, like I said, tell them you are growing a vegetable garden, so your numbers are per 1,000 square feet, and follow these recommendations that you see here. If you do everything fine, you have nothing to do pre-plant. If you don't tell them that it's a vegetable garden, they think you're a truck farm, then they give you a recommendation per acre, which is a lot of extra calculation that you need. Okay. Now, remember, a soil test is how much you need to add pre-plant, not season long. You have to look at, we have on Aggie Horticulture extension publications for the homeowner for each individual crop, tell you how much you add. Many websites like Johnny Seed, when they have information on how much to fertilize the crop that you're buying from them, that vegetable. So there's lots of references. Other universities have their own recommendation. So that's for during the season. Soil test is for before planting. Okay. Now, cover crop is a free fertilizer, and any even home gardener should do that. If you don't have a fall garden now and you have raised bed, go spread some winter wheat or winter rye or ryegrass or Austrian winter pea, thick, plant it thick, or any bean, plant it thick and let them grow. Don't just let it sit there, and I'll show you why will benefit. This table shows you what the math that a commercial grower does to save money and to be accurate, because of the recommendation is 130 pounds per acre and you have 100 acres to fertilize. You do this math and you take advantage of the credit that you have in the soil and the sampling time correction and this and that. And you find that you only have to apply 93, not only instead of 130. Look at how much savings on the money wise you had, but also on trying to reducing the waste that may go in the creeks or your lakes or your ponds. And where is that credit comes from? From the legume or from the organic matter correction that you have in the soil. So cover crop will get you that organic matter benefit credit in the soil that you have. And to proof of that, this is a trial I did years ago in College Station, very sandy soil, very poor in organic matter. It was an earth kind trial, and look how much mulch I did. I put a 6-inch mulch on that 50 by 100 foot block. Okay, all of that, spread it. Here, the picture showing you before it was spread. A year later, do you still see where the plot was? You still see here the line, the edge of the line where the organic mulch, the 6-inch of mulch that was there and incorporated and now is rotting and it's becoming compost. I mean, I definitely can see it right there. And I took a sample and I sent it in, and here's that sample. Look at the organic matter, 19.5% organic matter. Remember, our native soil is 1.5%, 2% organic matter. I had 19.5 organic matter. And look at the nutrient content. There is nothing I need to do to that soil, just plant. And it's so rich in nitrogen, I don't even have to use starter fertilizer. So organic matter, and life is good. Okay, so mulch, mix it in or let it rot, add the organic matter. One way. Another way is, like I told you, plant a cover crop and mix it in. We know peanuts, we know the beans and peas make fixed nitrogen from the air. So plant your fall garden with any kind of peas and beans, plant them thick. You're not going to harvest them to eat, so plant them thick like you see here. Cut them, let them rot, mix them in the soil, and all that will rot and release the nitrogen for your spring crop. That's the benefit of organic matter. But what we call green manure, because instead of animal manure, you're taking green matter and you're using it as green manure. So here examples of ryegrass or cereal rye, hairy vetch, all of those are planted as a cover crop to be cut and mixed in as food source, as fertilizer for the following crop. Okay, you have leftover cabbages, whatever, chop really well and mix them, let them dry out a little bit, mix them in, and they will release all that nutrient back in the soil. Just only thing with cabbages is they release mustard gas in tiny amounts. So if you do this, you want to recycle the cabbage or any of that cabbage family, cabbage, broccoli, cauliflower, don't follow it with a seed crop, follow it with a transplant because it may kill the seed following it. Of course, you can get, you can buy mulch and mix it in, and then in the alleyways, and then a year later, add it to the garden. So what we call in-ground composting. And here's an old pictures a friend of mine sent me. So the alleyways is here where the leaves are. And this one, it's more modern. We're using mulch as the in the alleyways. Keep adding it, keep filling it, and it'll rain and you walk on it, breaks down. A year later, it'll become compost. And then you dig it up, you see the leaves became mulch, became compost, and you spread it on top, and then you refill it with new layer of mulch. Leaves that may not have access to a huge amount of leaves, but mulch that you can buy is readily available. So let's talk a little bit about pH. There is the theory and then there's reality. Ideally, I want your pH to be 6 to 6.5. Reality, don't look at the pH. Don't look at it. Don't ask me, my pH is high, my pH is low, what do I do? What I want you to do is add organic matter. You keep adding organic matter, like I told you, the last thing you want to do before planting, and that will fix your pH. Your pH will be 6.8 or 6.5 and will never change afterward. Just keep adding organic matter. Do not bother adding acid or adding lime to fix the pH. Just add organic matter. Okay, because this opinion based on experience from my raised bed soil that the pH never changed, and from this study on lettuce, where they grew it at various pHs from 3 to 9. Look, here, look at the size of the roots and the plant. When it pH 5, 6, or 7, or 8. Very little difference. If it's 9, definitely half the size, that's bad. If it's 4, half the size, that's bad, it's edible. But it's 3, that's too acidic, it does not grow well. So you tell me my pH is 8. You're not going to see 10% difference. It's too small. Or your pH is 5. Look, there's no difference. Ignore it, the pH, add organic matter, think about the soil, what feed the soil, and then the organic matter will fix the pH as an added bonus for you. So in summary, the key to a sound nutrient management of fertilizer, use a balanced fertilizer. Balanced fertilizer is NPK, the three big numbers, but with the macro and micronutrients. So everything, not just NPK. Sample your soil regularly, periodically, let's say once a year when you're a new gardener for 3 years, and then you can skip, and maybe you can do it every third year or every second year. Remember that best nutrient application is to the soil, not foliar feeding, unless you want to fix macronutrient deficiency. And that's the last point here. All right. I know we have some time, so let me briefly go over the eternal question, which is better, organic versus inorganic fertilizers. Well, from the strict fertilizer point of view, if you ask the plant, if you are able to ask the plant, they tell you, what does that mean? The plant needs nitrate, whether it came from a fish or whether it came from a bag of chemical fertilizer. The plant don't know the difference. Joe Masabni is pragmatic. Add organic matter, be as organic as you want, and you need to, because I mentioned many times, add organic matter, add organic matter. This is the organic option. But Joe Masabni, being pragmatic, I'd rather pay cheap, less amount for a chemical fertilizer than a large amount for a organic fertilizer, and because the plant don't know the difference. Okay, that's me. You do what you like. Okay, and of course, keep in mind that some forms of organic fertilizer already start with a lot of phosphorus if they, let's say, have bone meal component in them. So you don't want to, you're adding more phosphorus and that can build up to excessive levels. It's not easy to accurately do the math when you're working with organic fertilizers because most of them are slow release. So unlike chemical fertilizer where you know how much you can deliver to the plant and how much is available, whereas organic fertilizer, all of it may be available in a week or all of it may be available in 2 months. So it's not easy to meet the demand of the plant. Okay. Of course, if you are regularly using cow manure or horse manure, you always have the risk of E. coli. So remember, if you use chicken litter, a cow manure, horse manure, fine. But just remember that if it's not composted, it is still considered fresh. Even though it sat outside in a barn drying for the last 5 years, it is not dry manure, it's still fresh. Because the minute you add water to it, that bacteria that's still dormant will wake up and can cause you trouble. So compost it, and now it will be safe in terms of health issues, in terms of E. coli issues. Has to be composted. This table, I'm not going to read it for you, read it at your leisure. The advantages and disadvantages between organic and inorganic fertilizers. But here is a list of organic fertilizers and what's their nutrient analysis and what's the application rate. So you'll see compared to triple 13, alfalfa meal is 212, so 6 times less. Bad guano is nice and rich, some is 10%, and blood meal is nice, it's 12% nitrogen, but 0 P and K. So, and this is how much you apply that, apply of that per 100 square feet, okay? So you can do the math and say, wow, 5 pounds at this price, then that's 100 square feet costing me this much versus 5 pounds of triple 13 and it's costing me this much. The math is easy to do. Well, from these two tables, I also want to bring an important point, is that the organic fertilizers are not regulated. I can take blood meal and add to it, spike it with triple 13 and tell you Joe's Miracle Fertilizer, and it's 15 or 25, 10, and call it organic and the ingredients are blood meal. I did not mention I spiked it with organic fertilizer and it's not regulated. I can get away with it. So whenever you want to buy organic fertilizer, look at the number for nitrogen. If it's more than 12, 13%, ask questions and check that it was not spiked and adulterated with chemical fertilizers. And this is for your reading pleasure in case you do want to be a Puritan and you do want to use a organic fertilizer, but the soil test recommendation tells you so much N and so much P and K. And here you follow the steps here for nitrogen and the steps in this slide for phosphorus on how you convert the numbers to the organic fertilizer that you want to use. Study it. If you have any questions, ask me. Okay, and this is for potassium. All right, here are examples of organic fertilizers, and you see the numbers 4, 2, 3, 4% N, 2% phosphorus, 3% K compared to triple 13. So you see the difference, less content and more expensive. Do they work? Absolutely, they work, because not only they provide NPK, but they also provide micronutrient, and they provide microorganisms like mycorrhiza, or definitely beneficial to the garden. They're just expensive. You know, I'm not saying they don't work. They do work. You just have to put more. The next few slides is an exercise I did to show you the cost of some of the fancy ways of fertilizing. If you like to use this liquid feed, which is a hose end, you plug it in, and whenever you're spraying, you're also fertilizing. It's called the bottle in feeder. It cost $8.5 per two of them. So, of course, so I did some math and show you how much. I'm not gonna go over the details, study it. And I also tested it on this Pennington Smart Feed, which is again hose end feeder. Here's the cost, here's everything, you read it. And Miracle-Gro, how much they recommend, how often they want you to recommend, and how much you ended up applying, and compared it to the greenhouse fertilizer of 2020. This is like the Cadillac of fertilizers. It's very water soluble, guaranteed to give you 20% of all this. If you are in a hydroponic operation or a greenhouse operation, that's what everybody uses. A 25-pound bag costs anywhere between $40 to $60, and it tells you exactly how much you have to mix. I use it because I like to use this Venturi siphon. Remember? I hope you remember I told you, if you take care of all your phosphorus as a band, pre-plant, if you take care of all your potassium as a broadcast incorporated, that takes care of your nitrogen, P and K for the whole season. Then all you have to worry is throughout the season, how much nitrogen, and only nitrogen, you have to fertilize. And if you do that, then a toy like this, which costs about $20, what's called a Venturi siphon, is what you need. You plug it in the hose that you're fertilizing with, and you drop it in the bucket with the fertilizer to fertilize. And if you don't want to fertilize, you take that hose out of the bucket and you're just watering. Just remember that this Venturi comes with a rating, sometimes 20x, sometimes 15x. So if I tell you, if the recommendation or the math tell you you need a teaspoon, then you need to make this solution in the bucket 20 times more concentrated. So add 20 teaspoons, because this Venturi will dilute it 20 times to give you back that teaspoon that you want to fertilize with, okay? So just keep that in mind. Read the instruction on that, and it costs about $20. So here is the comparison between those three, hose and feeder, compared to the Peters 2020 cost. Yes, you think, oh, Pennington tablet is only $5. Miracle-Gro only $5.8, much cheaper than 60. But how much are you applying in terms of pound of N per application? 0.1, 0.1, 0.3 versus 5 pounds. So what is the cost per pound of N? This one is $12, because you divide 60 divided by 5. You divide this by that. For every pound of N, you're paying $75, $45, $21. So yes, this initial cost is a lot more, but you can use it more often, many times more, and the cost per application is a lot cheaper. So commercial grower, definitely you tell them, I want to, definitely these are too expensive. And of course, they are not tailored for commercial grower. They're tailored for the homeowner because of the ease of application. Just put the tablet and turn on the water and you fertilize. And that works. And if you can afford $8, forget the $75. That's what you're paying. And it works. What I do is I try to simulate what the commercial growers do by using a fertilizer injector. So I don't use the hose end feeder. This is called Easy Flow. Unfortunately, you can't find it at Garden Center. I can write the name in the chat box when we finish. Easy Flow, EZFLO. Look it up and buy it online. At the time, I bought it 1 gallon unit for about $60. Now it's more. And everything else here with the backflow preventer, splitter, timer, and all that you get from any garden center. So you mix your fertilizer solution in it, and every time you fertilize, you water. Every time you water, you're fertilizing with it. This is what I do. So I prepare a 200 parts per million solution. Oh, here it is, Easy Flow. Here's the brand name of that container, Easy Flow. The bag tells you how much you need to add, 13.5 ounce. Let me go back to this slide. See, if you are using a 1:100 injector and you want 200 parts per million, then you need 13.5 ounces per gallon in that solution to get the 200 parts per million at 1/100 dilution. So I mix it, and every time I'm watering, I'm fertilizing. My watering program at peak is every other day. No, this is initial, not at peak. At peak during June and July, I was watering twice a day. So let's say I'm watering every other day for 1 hour. You do the math, and that 25-pound bag will last me 30 refills, because 25 pounds, and I'm using less than a pound each. So here's 30 refill. So that means even if I spend $60, then that bag will last me for 2 years. You do a little bit more math, you'll to see exactly, and I'm not going to go over the details, but I'm showing you that if I using the 1 gallon container that I have, and it comes in 5, and it comes in 5 gallon size. For my gallon at the volume I'm using, I have to refill it every 9.7 times. Since I water every other day, every 20 days, I have to refill it. Of course, you can just look at the bucket. Instead of being dark blue, you see it turning white, you know that there's no more fertilizer in it. Okay, what I want you to have on hand is bone meal, because that will supply your phosphorus as a pre-plant. Put it as a band, remember, 2 inches to the side, 2 inches deep where the roots are. So it's here it is, 0, 10, 0. Calcium nitrate, if you want to use this injector that I'm talking, then calcium nitrate is better than ammonium nitrate, because it supplies calcium and nitrate at the same time. Okay, muriate of potash will give you all the phosphorus, because it's 0,060. That you can spread, like I told you, broadcast it and incorporate it before planting, and then you don't have to worry about potassium the rest of the season. I suggest you have chelated iron this is organic version, Biomin iron, for supplying nitrogen and foliar feeding. Even if sometimes you think you have plenty of nitrogen and iron in the soil, sometimes the plants turn pale. Weather conditions do that. You fertilize it, you foliar feed it with that. In 2 days, they green up, and they're doing great for you. I think I will stop here. There's few extra slides. I'm not gonna stop describe them, but read them to show you how you can do your own soil test to see what kind of soil type you have. Do you have clay loam? Do you have clay? Do you have sandy loam? And here are the steps on how to do it. Very nice approach. Do it at home and do the math, and tells you, like for this example, I have loam, perfect soil for the garden. And with that, I'm ready for questions.
All right, thank you, Dr. Joe. Okay, we have a lot of questions. We have questions here on Zoom and also on YouTube. So what I'm going to do is I'll ask you the Zoom questions, and Pat, do you mind asking the YouTube questions? All right, I'll go ahead and start. I'll go ahead and start with the Zoom questions. Okay, Pat? Okay. All right, so we had, okay. So Margaret asks, I recently received a soil test that shows I have excess levels of P in my garden. Should I avoid a transplant starter solution that contains high levels of P?
No, because where you're adding that starter fertilizer only in that one spot, and the roots will love you for it. You're not adding it over the whole garden. So when you transplant, you fertilize that, you add starter fertilizer, that 8 ounces of the mixture on that plant, not the whole bed. You benefit the plant, even though that one spot will have excess fertilizer, but the benefit outweighs the disadvantage. Just make sure you don't apply everywhere.
Okay.
Only the plant.
Okay.
Remember,
so,
we tell you water after you transplant. Well, instead of water, use that starter fertilizer as watering.
Oh, okay. Good tip. Okay. So I have a question to add on to that. So what do you, or how do you feel about, or do you know anything about using worm castings when you're transplanting? Like putting worm castings in the hole with your transplant?
It's not a bad problem, not highly recommended. I'm all for organic options. I'm all for slow release options because you cannot burn the plant. Worm casting will break down over time and will keep feeding the plants as they rot and break down, and roots will take advantage of them. So why not? I'm all for it.
Okay. All right. So we had a couple questions about how and where to get the soil tests. And so I believe that is at soiltesting.tamu.edu. Does that sound right to you, Dr. Joe?
That is correct. That is the website for the soil testing lab, and has the forms that you can fill and everything.
Right. And so the website's not super fancy. So you actually have to scroll down to the bottom of the website, and there are links at the bottom, and there's one about forms. And the forms, you have to fill out the form that accompanies your sample. And I think there's also some instructions on the form about how to take your samples and where to mail your samples to.
That's right.
So just, scroll all the way down. It's a little surprising when you go to the website. It's not what you're expecting to see.
It is old. It's time to be renewed and brought to the 21st century, but it works.
Yes, exactly. All righty. Okay. So this is kind of an opinion question. Okay. So I apologize for pronouncing the person's name incorrectly, but Nazva asks, my friends tell me not to use Miracle-Gro on my edible raised garden as we ingest these vegetables, for example, tomatoes, peppers, eggplants, and to use my fruit, and I use my fruit tree pomegranate. Oh, and she uses it on her fruit trees, such as her pomegranate and her fig, which I have both of those fruit trees, and they do great here in North Texas. What are your views?
Well, like I told you, the plant don't know the difference, and apply it to the soil. The plant will absorb it. I don't see how that can hurt you. So I'm not a nutritionist, so I know the plants love it. The plant use it. I don't know why they're saying don't use Miracle-Gro because you're eating it. The plant need the fertilizer. I don't see why. I mean, we've been using it for ages since they started with the chemical fertilizers. Why is it bad? I have no idea. One concern I know is that you don't want too many nitrates in the tissue, because that, especially with older people, and even Europe now has limits on how much nitrate content in the tissue is. So I would worry how much nitrate is in the tissue, and nutritionists will tell you what consequences you have for your kidneys or that. But whether you use chemical fertilizer or organic fertilizer, the nitrate will be in the tissue, because you put more, it will be more in the tissue, in the leaves that you're eating, whether it came from Miracle-Gro or it came from organic fertilizer. So.
Okay. And so it's basically just do what you feel comfortable doing, because there's options both ways. You went over several options about how to add organic and inorganic fertilizers. So basically we're all better educated now, and we can make those informed choices. And I guess one comfort you have if you want to go, like you talked about, the organics have lower levels, even they're a little bit more expensive, but if you need to reapply, you could always reapply.
Yeah.
All right. So I have a couple more, Pat, before you take those YouTube questions. Okay. All right. So, okay, this is a good one from Catherine. If the recommendation is to apply a high nitrogen fertilizer, would you use only bone meal or bone meal
Or blood
for
meal.
organic gardening?
I'm not recommending the high nitrogen fertilizer. All I'm saying is that the plants need a high amount of nitrogen fertilizer. So you use a chemical fertilizer like triple 13, let's say use 5 pounds. You use organic fertilizer, that's 3% N, then you may have to use 6 times more, so 30 pounds of that. So the total amount of N of nitrogen is high. I'm not recommending using, so you want to use blood meal, that's 10%, that's high, and that's good. Unlike others, which are in the range of 3%. But let's say you want to use something that's the first number in the series is 3, then you have to add more frequent amounts. More once a week instead of once every 4 weeks if you're using, for example, triple 13, because the plant needs a certain amount of N. You use high nitrogen fertilizer, you 2 or 3 times is enough to meet that demand. You use a low nitrogen concentration in an organic fertilizer, you need to apply it more often so that the total amount meets the plant needs. I hope I was clear. But the bone meal, remember, bone meal has no nitrogen, is mostly phosphorus. Blood meal is great. The combination of the two are definitely necessary with muriate of potash. So you want to be organic and you can be successful. Blood meal, that's for N. Bone meal for phosphorus, and muriate of potash for potassium. Those 3 are just as good as the 20-20-20 that I told you, the Cadillac of chemical fertilizers.
Right. And thank you, Dr. Joe. I actually misread that wrong. So thank you for knowing enough that means that I was trying to say bone meal. So thank you for clarifying that. But yeah, so it's great that you gave us those organic alternatives. Yeah. Okay, so this is an interesting question. What about using spent coffee grounds in your garden? Does that have benefit?
Oh yeah, that's high in nitrogen and all kind of other things. If you can get it, use it. But don't make a habit every time you get it, spread it, because it's a slow release and it's high in nitrogen. With time, you may add too much. And don't overdo it, especially with beans and peas, because you have too much nitrogen. You have a forest of beans and peas and not a single flower. But tomatoes, use it all the time, no problem. Save it, put it in the compost pile, actually. If you have compost, that can replace the green matter that you're adding. If you run out of green matter, like in the middle of winter, you don't have grass clippings and you want to continue adding, coffee grounds is great. If you want to spread it, and the filter paper, put it in filter paper in the soil or in the compost pile. That will break down eventually also. For the leafy greens, for the beans and peas, don't overdo it, because with time you may be applying too much nitrogen.
That's a good tip. I actually, I drink a lot of coffee, so I have a lot of coffee grounds, right? Good, so I even use them sometimes if I have a low spot in my yard, like, a place that collects water or something like that. Sometimes I use it to fill that hole. So my grass grows great in those places because it's got all that nitrogen in it. Fantastic. Okay. Just to let everybody know, we understand we're a little past the hour, and if you have to leave us, we completely understand. However, Dr. Joe has been very generous, and he is going to stay for an extended question and answer session. So we will be going a little longer, as far as for as long until 1:30 maximum, or until we run out of questions. And of course, this entire thing is recorded, or will be recorded, and you will have access to that and all the answers to the questions we get. Okay, Pat, so I'm going to pass it on to you for those YouTube questions.
Awesome, thank you. Okay, so let me pull up the questions so I can start reading them off. So somebody asked that what can they do to fix stunted corn growth? Is it too late once the corn has started growing?
Yes. Um, Once it started growing, like say mid-season, and they're stunted, you can add extra nitrogen or rebalance, get a soil test, add NPK. Though don't you will see benefit in the corn ear, but don't expect miracle in the height. And of course, the ear is what you're harvesting. If they're not growing as fast as you like, add NPK, and the ear will be fine even though the plant is short. But sweet corn is both heavy feeder and heavy water user. So you have to do both. Just adding more fertilizer, but forgetting to water regularly, there's no benefit of that fertilizer. So never let the soil dry out ever for sweet corn, and fertilize weekly. And your corn should be 6 foot tall and an average of year and a half or two per plant. And that's when you know you did a good job on your corn.
Okay, thank you. And then they have another question they asked. They asked if dog urine has nitrogen, and why does it kill their plants and grass?
What is the plant?
I think they just said that the dog urine kills their plants and grass, and they were asking
Dog
if
eating?
it has
What is that?
nitrogen, like dog urine.
Dog urine.
Mm-hmm.
Dog urine is urea, so that's high nitrogen. For that one spot, if the dog pees in that one spot only, it will burn the grass, but you don't see spots in the backyard. At one spot, the pH will change dramatically, but then the bacteria will work on it. But if that dog has fixated on one spot and every day they pee in that same spot, absolutely, that will turn dead and the grass will die. But I wouldn't worry. But I definitely don't let them pee in the vegetable garden because of E. coli concerns, not for urea or pH issues or anything.
Awesome, thank you.
Yes.
And one more question is that they see Narandran worms in their compost bin. Are there any good versus bad worms? Should they be concerned about the kind of worms they have in their compost bin?
Usually the worms that are in the compost pile are the composting worms. So they're not the diseased worms like nematodes or things. So, but again, you can tell if they're big, they're usually good guys, or nematode or earthworms. You can tell those are good guys. White grubs, that's only a serious problem, but they usually likes. So those you don't see them if the compost pile is cooking properly and the temperature is high enough. So my answer, like I started saying, that they usually are not harmful worms, but my real problem is why do you see them? And because it's not cooking to the right temperature. If it's cooking well at the right temperature, you should not see them at all because it's too hot for any worm to be there, including earthworms. So fix the cooking strategy, and then the worms will disappear.
All right. And to continue off on the composting questions, they asked, how do you compost manure? Do you just add it along with the vegetable and fruit waste that you have in your compost bin?
Absolutely. Add your cow manure with a lot of straw, with a lot of dry matter, leaves, chips, mix them well, like 1-to-1 by volume. Let's say 1 bucket and of this and 1 bucket of that, and add water and let nature do its work. Turn it, let's say every 3 weeks. And that's the best way. Just leave them there by themselves. There's not enough food for the bacteria to cook. So you need to add dry matter.
Awesome. Then one of their last questions was asking about how much does it cost to do a test, and then if they can get it done for a Plano address.
Oh yeah. Go to that website, and I think it's like $12 or $20, depend if you want NPK or you want every single mineral. Then it's more expensive. If you know your county extension agent, go to them and they can give you the bag. They can tell you more information, and they can tell you how to sample it, where to send it. But that soiltesting.tamu.edu is the website that will have the address
Awesome.
and
Thank
information.
you, Joe. I appreciate that. I know they had a lot of
Welcome.
great questions. I think that's most of them. The last one was they're asking if there's an equivalent organization in Plano that will speak to their organization because they have a lot of their employees live in Dallas as well.
Equivalent organization to what?
Maybe to do the presentation. I'm not really sure what they meant by that question.
If they want a presentation for them, I'll be happy to help. Helen would be happy to, I guess I can't speak for her, but if they want something similar for their group, contact me and we can figure something out.
Thank you.
I agree. I'll put, Dr. Joe, do you mind if I put your email in the chat so they can reach out to you?
Please.
Or actually, I guess you'll also have to put it on the YouTube if you don't mind, Vanessa. So let me put it, drop here, Dr. Joe, right there. And since Dr. Joe does work for Texas A&M Extension Research, Everything Cool and Awesome group, his job is to do education like this. And so, you know, if you just ask real nicely and, you know, kind of set everything up, he shows up on time every time. And he's been our guest here multiple times, and I want to thank him for that. He will be back the week of Christmas. So the Monday of Christmas, Dr. Joe will be back to talk about container gardening, which I know is another popular topic. So it's going to be pretty timely if you're going to want to start getting some containers ready for the spring. But next week, we have a really fun presentation. So we're going to do a little bit twist because we know we have the holiday at the end of the month. And we're actually having Candace Chandra from Chandra's Teas coming, and she's going to talk about terrifyingly good teas, how to brew the perfect potion. So it's going to be really fun and interesting. Maybe a little bit more. She's actually going to show you how to properly brew different types of tea. And of course, how to make some teas with the herbs that you grow. And then also some of the different kinds of benefits you can get from different teas. And when you mix the different herbs, how that can create different benefits for you. So it's going to be really fun, really enjoyable. If the weather stays like this, you might want to join us with a cup of hot tea. All right, so Dr. Joe, I have a question for you.
Please.
Okay, so if, like you mentioned, I could buy a big bag of fertilizer and use that, you know, use a little bit each time, you know, I'm watering and different things like that. And how long will that bag of fertilizer like stay good? I mean, you know, like, does it lose its efficiency or its potency over time?
No. If it's a chemical fertilizer and you're storing it in a dry place, so it doesn't absorb water, then 2 or 3 years later, it's still the same. Only if it gets wet, let's say it gets rained on and then you have a solid block, then that solid block is much more concentrated because all the nutrient dissolved and accumulated in one place and hardened versus that end one side that's granular. So the concentration changes. The whole amount is still the same if you want to use it all at once. So don't let your dry fertilizer get wet. And don't let your liquid fertilizer freeze. We don't have that serious issue. Like if you were in Michigan, I'll tell you, store in place where it doesn't freeze. Here, it doesn't get that cold. Even in the garage is fine. Even if there's snow outside, it's not freezing inside the garage. Don't let the liquid freeze and don't let the dry formulations get wet, and they should last for years. That's not the same for chemicals. Fungicide, insecticide, they have a lifespan before they run out, but chemical fertilizer, I've used them 5 years later and didn't see like, oh, what's wrong? You know, you still see benefit.
Okay, so it looks like we are good on questions. Are there any other questions on Facebook, Pat? I mean, I'm sorry, on YouTube, Pat, before I start asking Dr. Joe all of my personal questions?
Not that I'm aware of. I didn't get any more.
Okay. All right, Dr. Joe. And I've kind of mentioned this before in some of our other presentations, but for the people who might not have joined us in the past. So you mentioned, I believe it is magnesium, and how a lot of times magnesium can be lacking from our soils here, right? And you also mentioned Epsom salt. Are you talking about the same stuff that I use like on my sore feet when you say Epsom salt?
That is the expensive one. So yes, that works. The formulation is great, dissolves nice, dissolves well. If you want to use it in the garden, it works well, but it's too expensive, really. The one they formulate with for the garden is a lot cheaper. So you want to use that, God bless. It's the same thing. It's magnesium sulfate.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So I can look on the ingredients on this package, and it does say magnesium sulfate, USP, Epsom salt. So it is pure, basically magnesium sulfate. So if I wanted to take a couple of handfuls of this and toss it like in my potted plants, or toss it around the base of some of my vegetables or something, I can, right?
Well, be careful. A couple of handfuls in a container, that's overdoing it.
Ah,
A couple of handfuls. You want to spread like a dusting. Think of it like a dusting. So a couple of handfuls around a tree. Yes, on the base of a tree, yeah, perfect. But a teaspoon maybe for a container or around a tomato. It's a fine dusting, not a thick layer.
Okay. All right. So I have, I've been trying to organic fertilize or organic garden for years with different levels of success. So just to let everybody know, it's not always as easy as you might think it is, but that's okay. The plants come back and you can always get more. So I was looking around at all the stuff I have, and I was super excited to find out I did have potash, which is one of the, like you recommended 3 or 4 things that we should have on hand, right? So I do have potash, and you're absolutely right. It does say like 0060 on here on this bag, just like you mentioned. Alrighty. And I do have some this organic garden fertilizer. And I think one of the reasons it's organic is because it smells like really strong. Like my dog is like trying to get into the bag. That's what this, it smells like fish and I don't know, like a dumpster.
Yeah.
And so I guess it's all that good organic stuff that's in here. And but this is something, if you're interested, you can find these at most garden centers and the big box stores. It's actually not too hard to find. You just maybe have to go to a little different section of those stores to get these kind of things.
Now, fish emulsion is probably the best. Fish emulsion, and I buy it in a 2.5 gallon jug. It stinks. Make sure it doesn't get on your hand or your clothes. It stinks to high heaven, but it works great. And 12% N, it's wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And the other thing is, if you do have pets and you use some of these organic products, you might be inviting your pets into your garden. Like my dog, unfortunately, she'll dig. When I have not used this fish emulsion because I know she's going to go in there and dig up everything I spray it on or roll in it. So that's something else to be mindful of, is if you're fertilizing, you might have to keep your pets away from your garden for a few days because they are going to be really interested in it because it smells like fish and stink.
I learned something new. I don't have pets, so I never knew that.
All right. And I also found out that I actually have a bag of lime. Can you remind me what this is good for?
Lime is to raise the pH and supply a little bit of calcium and phosphate there, but that's commercially they do it every year to fix the pH and make sure that the calcium and phosphorus is supplied and make sure that the pH is in the right range so that some of the nutrients are still available.
Okay.
Homeowner just add compost and your pH would be fine and everything will be fine.
Okay.
But if you have it, use it. Like I told you, fine dusting, just like the Epsom salt. So maybe those two together at the same time when you sprinkle a thin layer is a great time to do it at planting time.
Okay, at planting time. Okay, so the last thing I found is I have this thing of horticultural molasses.
Okay.
Do you have any recommendations on how I could use this?
This, you can use it. This is like sugar. It will give the soil microorganism like a sugar rush. they will explode in numbers. And so if you have a spot that kind of dead in the, let's say, lawn or neglected and it's not healthy, you add compost, you add mulch, or you add compost, or combination of the two, and you add molasses. You're adding the raw food and the microorganisms and the sugar for the soil microorganisms to break them. And they will quickly convert that cellulose into nutrient NPK for the plants to absorb. So I wouldn't use it as a fertilizer. I would use it always with a compost, with mulch. Compost is already cooked, but you add it with mulch, it will break it down faster and make the compost faster.
Oh, okay.
So even in a little bit in the compost pile, why not?
All right. Okay. So with all of that, we had one more question pop up, and then
Okay.
after this, we'll wrap up. So Natasha is asking about eggshells.
Yeah.
And about what are the benefits of adding eggshells to your garden, and how much should you add?
The recipe I looked at my notes, and recipe I started with was 6 eggshells and 16 fluid ounce of vinegar. So prepare, dry them, and if you have a coffee grinder, grind that eggshell to powder. Add 6 eggshells into the 16 fluid ounce and let them foam. So a day later, keep stirring. When the foam is done, now you have a 16 fluid ounce of calcium solution, and the pH is better. And use it spread it. I spread it over I think 6 plants, because 1 eggshell per plant, and that will supply at planting time. That will supply all the calcium that the plants and will love you for it, and you'll never have blossom end rot.
Ah, blossom end rot. Very good.
Yes. So calcium, the plants love calcium, and they need, any fruiting vegetable wants calcium, but we see it, the blossom end rot, you see it more prominently in tomato, but I've seen it in pepper, I've seen it in squash, watermelon, everywhere.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Dr. Joe, once again, thank you so very much for sharing your time and knowledge with us. I think we all learned a lot. I actually took notes, and I think one of the things I'm going to walk away with is compost, right? You make compost, use compost. You can even make compost in your garden. Yes. By using it in the walkways. That is a brilliant idea. Just digging trenches, filling it with leaves. You could put your coffee grounds in there. You could put your eggshells in there, all sorts of stuff. And then, literally, the young girl was just scooping it right back onto the plants when it was done in a year.
And you don't have to build a special place. And and now just remember, you may have to use a rototiller to soften it, because it's compact and very hard. So loosen it with a rototiller and then shovel it, to dig it on top of the bed.
That is a fantastic thing to do. And that's something we can all do. It's pretty easy with our yard waste and our kitchen waste and things like that. So even if you're just digging a hole and burying all that stuff in there, over time, it's going to break down and provide nutrients to your plants. Absolutely. All right. So just a reminder, everybody who registered in advance for this presentation will get an email in a day or two with a link that will allow you to download this recording and also the PDF for Dr. Joe's presentation. And also, if you would still like that information, you can contact the Dallas Public Library, and they can also share that information with you. And this session is going to be on the Dallas Public Library's YouTube page under playlists, Dallas Environmental Quality and Sustainability. So you can always reference it if you did not register in advance. But of course, if you did, you will have this recording to reference and visit with us all the time. And anyways, we want to thank you, everyone in our audience who came today, for wanting to learn and spending your time with us today, and to make Dallas a greener and better place. So on behalf of Dr. Joe and the Dallas Public Library, thank you so much. And we will see you next week for Terrifyingly Good Teas.
Bye-bye.